Trusty Ape. I guess we're doing a short little stream today, but first, we'll do the intro. All right, that was the intro, I suppose. Again, Trusty Ape here, doing a short one to drain the swamp, of course, which means we'll be, looking at something in the watch later list. Good morning, Tilting Windmill. Good to see you. I don't have too much time, but I did want to just come on and say, like, obviously the dynamics here are shifting, and so like I'll still be trying to do live streams like this and all of that, but I do want to devote a bit more time to my philosophy channel at Stupid Monkey Philosophy or Answers in Stoicism. Gotten some pretty good hits on my shorts over there, which just clip from like my videos and other videos and stuff like that. But it's also kind of something I want to start devoting study to again. In the meantime, I have met with the Mormons. So kind of long story short, I had some Mormons stop me the other day, actually, after I did my last stream on Sunday. They were out walking around the town, and they stopped to talk to me for a bit. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm a non-believer and all of that. And then they asked if we could talk more, and so I invited them over to the house, and so now they have invited me to come tour their church, which it looks like I might be doing on Friday. I somewhat played, I feigned ignorance a bit, um, because I do know probably a bit about Mormonism, and so, but I kind of wanted to see how they would respond to me in certain questions, and just kind of playing the field as it were, I guess. I don't know why. It seems like if I was to subscribe to a religion, it'd probably have to be kind of a crazy one. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it just we go with what we feel at the time, and that was what I was feeling, and so now I'm kind of well, I guess I could just flake on them, right? But I feel like maybe I should keep this engagement and kind of go see what happens from there. So that might be happening. And anyway, so on my last video response to Deconverted Man survey, I got a comment here from Nunya Biz 5880, and I wanted to respond to that. I didn't want to just give like a simple text response. I thought I might talk about this a little bit on stream. It says, Trusty, if you're atheist, materialist, naturalist, you've got no reason to ever jump while watching a horror movie or in a haunted house, yeah? And so my response to that is no. I mean, so there's a couple things going on here in my mind. So fear response, right? Fear response is a natural response. We have kind of evolutionary programming says that we ought to be afraid of these things, like whatever it is, if it seems threatening, right? If it seems like we might risk life or injury, even, then we should be afraid of those things. And when you're talking about like horror movies and haunted houses, even for the atheist who does not believe in the supernatural, the nature of the experience, right, is to mess with your nervous system. So they curate these types of you know entertainment so as to heighten the fear response. Um, so, and with that being said, like I think that people are inclined to like accept certain concepts. Um, like for instance, even if we know that a horror movie obviously isn't real, it's something that's been staged, it's been filmed. We are expecting to be scared. So it's kind of a disappointment if we're not scared. If we go to a horror movie and it doesn't frighten us, then that filmmaker really hasn't done their job, right? They haven't impressed us. Um, and similarly with a haunted house, I mean, we may understand that these are people in costumes and this is all staged and there's no real present danger, but we anticipate being scared. And if somebody does uh, sufficiently work to startle us, right, then that is the logical response, right? You're being startled by an individual, and it's probably more startling because they are in, spooky dress or whatever, right? But nonetheless, if it was just a person in plain clothes who jumped out of the corner and scared you, that's kind of the point of this activity. Now, it's not to say that that gives us more belief in supernatural claims, right? We can still entertain these ideas and have fun with them in this context. But that's different than like believing that that a house is haunted and maybe seeing ghosts or something like that, right? That would be an apparition. That would be some entirely different experience. And for most of us, we simply have not encountered that type of experience. And so it makes it more difficult for us to believe those things. Um, so fear is a natural response. And I think that's important because people will say, well, what do you fear? And then they're, this meme basically that people have been is like, oh, well, I only fear God, right? Um, which I think is BS because they fear all kinds of things in the naturalistic world, right? But they say that they only fear God because that is what their faith tells them, and that there is no power higher than God, and so um, yeah. So I don't think that being scared or being susceptible to a situation in which something unknown or unfamiliar is presented, right, necessarily makes one agnostic to the claim. And you could still believe in supernatural types of claims without believing, in particular, the theistic claim of Christians, right? Um, Outside of that, people can still hold supernatural beliefs, and So did I pass it? No, no, not yet. Um, so that was kind of my thoughts on that. I thought it was an interesting question to say. Well, that if you have fear of something unknown, well then isn't that like somehow against naturalism? But actually, I think that is perfectly in line with naturalism. Naturalism tells us that thing in the bushes, if it's there, right? We had better. It's like Pascal's wager. We are better off being afraid of something that may not be there than not being afraid and having that thing be there, that lion in the bushes, and being eaten. So it's better for us. Oh, thank you for posting that in the chat, Tilting Windmill. I see. Stupid Monkey Philosophy. that is my alternate channel where I produce far less content, but it is something that I plan on working on more. Um, so yeah, I clipped kind of my short piece on skepticism from my response to the survey, and then that got uh, quite a few views. Oh, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. All right, so I kind of wanted to look at this one. It's been in the watch later list for a minute, and this is from Matt Frad, which is Pints with Aquinas. He's changed his channel name, but same basic setup. And this is a question that I posed to the Mormons when they were over here. This feeling of separation or disconnection from God. And I know this is this is a Catholic response. It's going to be a little bit different, but I wanted to check this video out.
Why don't many Catholics seem like outposts of Eden? Or why don't many Catholic churches seem that way? You go into a Catholic church, and some Catholic churches are uglier than your local post office. And even if they aren't, you don't have necessarily a sort of phenomenological experience of it being something different.
Right.
So isn't this just beautiful poetry that isn't really true?
No, it's so much more than beautiful poetry. No, it's more true than any poetry, and it's true whether you feel it. I mean, like everything you just said, virtually concerned sense perception. It's like, well, I walk in, I don't necessarily feel it. Well, you don't feel spiritual reality, okay? Because we don't have, the five senses are all designed to detect matter and energy. They're not designed to, we don't have a sense that detects divine presence. Now, sometimes we have something that we call a sixth sense, where we do have a sense of the presence of God, but that's not one of the five physical senses.
I find it interesting. He's using like the sixth sense, and then obviously we can use like the popular meme. Well, I see dead people. Um, so all right, so the spiritual realm cannot be detected by physical senses, so you don't actually feel spirituality. What about all these Christians who claim that they feel the presence of God or they feel the inspiration of God, and that's what they're doing when they're in church, when they're speaking in tongues, when they're doing these rituals, is all related to feeling sensations. But where does that sensation come from? Well, not our naturalistic five senses. It must be some unknown sixth sense, right? That we can't describe. It's the God sense, I guess, or something like that. So right now, this is not. I think I see where he's going, but let's give it a little more.
And we're so tied. We're so much like Pavlov's dog. We're so conditioned to judge everything by our five senses that, oh, if I walk into a Catholic sanctuary and I don't get some kind of sense perception that I'm back in Eden, then it's not really the case. And so what, if I go to the Phipps Gardens in Pittsburgh, it's beautiful botanical gardens there, then I walk into the jungle area and I'll feel like I'm back in Eden. But that's just a sensation, without the reality. But St. Peter's downtown may not feel like Eden, but it's the reality apart from the sensation. Now, there's value in building Catholic churches that are beautiful and that communicate to the senses. And I think what that does is it helps us to be disposed and to get into the right frame of mind, to be more receptive, and it makes the act of faith easier. And that happens.
So okay, I'm unmuted now. Sorry, I'm having to switch back and forth because I don't have earbuds today. But anyway, so this concept that he has now is that like these man-made structures are kind of a representation, and it makes people more susceptible to the idea that something grand may be going on here, right? Because uh, it's not very common for people to put this type of uh, grand effort into making these structures. And so these churches, by being very like grandiose and captivating, right, that gives one an idea of what the spiritual realm might look like, but there's actually no indication of what the spiritual realm does look like. And furthermore, it doesn't actually connect you to the spiritual realm according to this guy. I'm not sure who the person he's in conversation with is, but Matt has these random various guests from the faith. Dr. Mordecai Cassius Marcellus Jones Jr., welcome, says, sometimes Christians see and hear things that are not there, but they don't do it all the time. Yeah, Sapolsky had something interesting to say about this, because they were looking at, I guess it was actually probably like a Christian of some flavor that was studying the Native American shaman, and had like this interesting observation that, or a conversation rather, with one of the people, one of the village people. YMCA. No, sorry. Anyway, one of the people in the village that was like, oh yeah, it's really cool that our shaman can like speak in tongues or whatever weird thing he was doing, but he was like, but thank God there aren't two of them, because like this selective insanity that we could be like, oh yeah, we can tolerate like one of these guys, and we can even like praise him for acting really unusual. But if there were too many people in the village like this, then we would probably not be able to function as a society. And so it's only a good thing in like small, controlled kind of environment, right? Geo Sam, good to see you. All right. How does one see and hear things that aren't there? Well, Geo Sam, I would say that I see and hear things that aren't there with some frequency, but I am aware that that is my internal monologue, right? At times I have doubted this, but, like, most of the time I am fully aware that that is my internal monologue, and its relationship to reality is kind of the word escapes me, right? But it's only my mind talking to me about what I experience, and it does it in such a way that sometimes I feel like there is some external source, but I know that that's not the case. Like when I sit back and I analyze it and I talk about it with people, it's like, no, that's just your brain talking to itself. And memories and vague thoughts that come and go, they're fleeting, and they can be understood, like if you break them down at the conceptual level. I mean, we know why we have these thoughts. We can usually trace it back to some source in reality, some experience we've had. James Apperson, good to see you. Says, Christians be like, to be fair, we're not always crazy. Get us talking about anything that isn't important, and then notice how sane we can be. Yeah. If it's not like, one of these supernatural claims, right? They can kind of get with us in the real world space here and say, oh yeah, up is up and down is down, and anybody else who is talking to themselves is probably schizophrenic, right? But if I do it, I'm definitely talking to God, for sure. That was another question I asked, because I asked about the efficacy of prayers to these Mormons who are at my house, and they didn't really have like much of a response, other than like the one thing I thought was crucial was he said, well, it's only important for you to have these conversations with God, and it's not really important if you ask me. Like if you ask another human being in the world, they're not going to actually be able to give you that answer, right? So you're only going to receive that answer if you are in conversation with God, which is in your own mind. And Geo Sam, I think there are pills for that. Yeah, maybe. Don't take drugs unless you need to, and if you need to, maybe consult with your doctor, or God, whoever you decide to consult with, I guess. For me, I've consulted many doctors and taken many pills that were, ineffectual or maybe caused more harm. So I have some reservations about that, but certainly there are people in the world who need their medication. whatever that be. And GeoSam says, if these things affect your everyday life, seek help. Just saying, yeah. Especially if it affects you negatively. And I think that's a thing about the church, is that there is so much positive reinforcement within the church that that you don't really perceive the negative effects, because you see that in your small community you have a lot of support, right? You have a lot of reinforcement, and so outside of that you can kind of take that with you, and so you don't really see the drawbacks unless you actually consult with somebody outside of your community, which would be rare, right? There's a lot of confirmation bias going on there. All right, Dr. Mordecai, I'm going to take a shower if anything big happens. Yeah, I'll give you a call. James Aberson says, Mormons, the great white hope. Yes. Well, they got through my door. Of course, I was not entirely candid with them, and Mrs. Ape kind of helped me with that, because I identified as a non-believer, and I, posed some questions. But Mrs. Ape actually brought up the fact that I do hang out in, atheist online spaces, and I, have debated some believers from time to time. And, I assured them that I was not, out to debate them, but just to kind of, learn what their perspective was. And so I'm still towing that line for the time being, and we'll see how that goes. But, one of the guys who was kind of the most outspoken one, when he initially stopped me, he commented on my Stoic tattoo, and he complimented it. And so when I asked him in conversation, well, did you study philosophy? He said, yeah, but only when I was doubting God, basically, was kind of the response there. They had some period in his life where he was doubting his faith, and so at that point he had studied philosophy, and so I kind of got the idea that he was, no longer receptive to those claims, but he understood them or had studied them at some point. And GeoSam says, if I were seeing and hearing things that aren't there, I'd be seeking some kind of professional help. So I had this issue before I went out to the farm. And so I had to do an intake interview, and I was going to go to a different farm before I went to the farm that I went to, right? And that was one of the issues that came up, was when I described my internal monologue to them, I guess the way I described it made them afraid that I was maybe like a liability, or that I had more mental health issues than I had. But again, when I discussed this with a professional who knew me, they were like, well, no, it's just the way you're describing it that makes it scary to people, right? And so you're very clear, like, hey, I'm not hearing people who aren't there telling me to do things. That's not the way this works. But I do have these dialogues going on in my head, and sometimes it seems as if it's not me, but I know that it is me. It's me internalizing like some other component of my experience, and having a conversation about it with myself. GeoSam, how did I determine that these things I'm hearing and seeing aren't there? Yeah, non-tangible, right? Anything that is intangible, I'd say, that would be the main thing. Of course, you might call that an apparition too if you believed in such things, but yeah, you've just got to use your best reasoning skills. And if you can't determine between what is and is not there, then maybe you do have like some legitimate psychiatric problem that needs fixing. Tilting Windmill says it always affects them negatively. They just don't realize it. Yeah, the believers. Ape has a boss, Dr. Mordecai. I have many bosses. Ape has a higher power. Well, I guess maybe. I definitely answer to somebody, but that is limited. If we're being rational, we limit the power we give others over ourselves, right? And we look at whether this is something that is mutually beneficial. Hey, my boss is getting something out of me, and I'm getting something out of them. In the relationship to Christianity, I would say that you're not really getting it from God, right? Anything you're getting back from Christianity, you're getting back from other Christians. You're not getting it from God directly. And I always find that part interesting because, like, so many people bring tithes and donations to the church, and then the church always thanks God, right? And well, it's all these people that donated to your church. God didn't give you money. And it reminds me of that George Carlin bit where he's like, this guy, he created the universe. He could see everything and do anything, but he needs money. He always needs money. Every church you go to, they're always asking for donations. God can just produce money from the ether, right? Like, he doesn't need your money. That's absolutely crazy. All right, we'll get back to this video because I'm off on tangent. But thank you.
It has helped many people convert. Like, they've walked into beautiful Catholic churches, and the beauty is a testimony to them and moves the heart, and makes it easier for the heart to make the act of faith. But ultimately, it's an act of faith. And even if we were on the battlefield and a priest came dressed in fatigues and just set up a little table and proceeded to celebrate Mass, he would be making Eden present right there.
Wow.
Even if we were in a wasteland where everything had been blown up by artillery shells. So again,
wait. So now, if you come in and you perform the ritual, well, that is like a spiritual. I have so much trouble with this, right? Like, because you're not providing like any type of change, you're not providing a solution, right? You're providing. What are you providing in this scenario? I mean, if a priest walks out on the battlefield, he's not stopping the war. God's not intervening. James Apperson says, I tell Mormons and JWs I can only study with hot single women because God said that's who he would send when he's ready for me. Yes, and this also reminds me of a thing that I was told by my kind of a surrogate mother of mine, my friend's mom, who was very devout. She claimed to run a ministry from her home, right? And she would frequently tell my friend and his brother that they didn't need to go out into the world looking for women, that God would bring the right woman to his doorstep. So my friend, being clever and somewhat skeptical, eventually got into these online spaces, and he met a young woman on Facebook. And so his solution to the problem was he saved up some money and he flew this woman out from another state. And his mom was very upset at him for, bringing this strange woman he met on the internet to the house. And he said, "Mom, you always told me that God would deliver her to my doorstep, and here she is." And so that was kind of a thing. And so he even used that, even though he had, converted from Christianity into some form of paganism, was what he claimed at the time, right? But he did use that kind of in turn against her later on in life. I always thought that was funny. Dr. Mordecai says, the ape sounds like a nervous person. Yeah, I'm a little nervy. Ape answers to his balls. That's also true. I actually thought about that a little bit yesterday. I was like, I was thinking about like what I, really want to do, and most of the time it has something to do with sex. I don't know. The ape might be a bit of a pervert. No, but I like other things too. Obviously, there's other things I'm doing when I'm not, in the act of procreation. But that is a powerful driver. So much time is devoted to, and I think this is for most people, and maybe this is where that religious influence kind of comes in to say that, oh, we need to shut down this part of our brain that is always, looking for, holes to fill, so to speak. because that's not always the most productive thing to do, and and it can be harmful. It can have drawbacks. It can be harmful. But I am something of a hedonist, I suppose. I try not to be, but it's there. It seems natural and intuitive, and so I think there's a healthy balance to kind of nurturing those natural instincts and then putting limitations on how much you allow, right? Because we can all go off the rails with things like that. But it tells me something about like why religious people behave the way they behave and why these Mormons are wearing magic underwear. Uh, Tilting Windmill says, I think those were sly references to Mrs. Ape. Tangents in the chat. And a priest with a table on the battlefield. Yeah. And I think this example it sounds silly, but it's probably something that has a bit of historical precedent. Like there are situations like this where we see priests or medics coming in and trying to bring some semblance of unity between these warring factions, probably with little or no success most of the time. But I think there's probably real stories we could point to where that has happened. And it seems like a noble endeavor, but obviously highly irrational. And this is what this guy thinks, is the equivalent to Eden on Earth, which is kind of weird because in Eden there was no strife, right? I mean, allegedly. There was no strife, and then, the snake came in. Who knows where he came from, right? Talks to the lady because he can talk in the story, and then they eat some fruit. And then strife begins, hardship begins because there was none before. So this is completely dissimilar, right? This dude coming in, bringing a table to the battlefield does not stop does not stop the war. It doesn't work. But I guess this irrational type of hope that it will work is what he's talking about. I don't know.
Too tied to the physical senses, and in a way, I would argue that the whole path of Christian discipleship is a pedagogy. It's all a pedagogy to wean us off of dependence on the five senses. Okay, and this is why I think, for example, why we don't get a zap when we take the Eucharist. Maybe we've talked.
I just love that. It's like, would you be expecting, like a physical response? Would you expect a high when you take the Eucharist? And that definitely doesn't happen unless maybe they got some good wine in there. You might get a buzz off of that. But then this whole thing where he's like, we're weaning off of a physical, off of a dependence on the five senses, dude. We literally depend on the five senses to keep us alive, right? Like these are the things that this is how we engage with the world. Without our five senses, we would not be engaged with the world. And thus, this is such a crazy idea to me that God would put you here to have this experience, but then the lesson is to not really engage with this experience or try to tune it out and tune into some other sense that is more or less like imperceptible, right? But if you can derive a feeling from it, but then he says you can't actually feel it. So which is it? Do you get a feeling from this sixth sense, or do you not derive any type of spiritual sensation, or what exactly does that mean? And it seems to me like the more they try to explain it, the more and more convoluted it gets and self-contradictory.
Talked about this on previous shows. Like when I was a young Catholic, for the first several years I was a Catholic, I'm like, okay, if it's body, blood, soul, and divinity, why don't I feel anything when I come forward? Why am I like a little high, like, ooh, Well, the reason why God doesn't attach like a physical sensation to the Eucharist is that if he did, why would people come to Mass? They'd come because they'd like that sensation, and we would be no better than heroin addicts.
Which, funny enough, is actually when they study the brain of religious people, that is the experience that they have, right? They can see the electrical impulses, dopamine being dropped, and so they do have an experience similar to drug addicts or alcoholics or anything like that, as far as like neurobiology, no, neurochemically. I think that's the term I'm looking for. Like the chemicals being released in the brain to a religious person when they're speaking in tongues or something like that is the same as the chemicals that we release if we're using drugs. It's identical. There's not a difference.
We'd just be coming for the sensation. But the point of the Eucharist is precisely to wean us off of our addictions.
Oh,
To get us to the point that we act on the basis of faith and trust in God's word, and not on feedback to the senses. So
you don't want to push that too far, though, do you? Because I could see someone making an argument for why we need to make Catholic churches uglier.
Well,
because if it was beautiful, then maybe people are only coming for the nice music and for the beautiful churches.
I think there was almost something behind the whole ugly movement. I don't know what else to call it in church architecture. It's like go back to the Trappist, because the Trappist spirituality kind of like is that. It's like let's remove the supports to the senses, and Trappist liturgy and is all very sparse, and so some of that movement in modernist church architecture was to make stuff sparse and kind of this monastic thing. And
it seems more inspired by communist brutalist.
Yeah, well, that's what it ended up looking.
No, it's communist. It's communist. Of course, you had to throw that in there. So something else, like in this whole dynamic, is this dynamic that the church, obviously every church is taking money from its congregants, right? And like in the evangelical circles, it's like more widely accepted. They're like, oh, we know that we're funding this pastor's lavish lifestyle, but that's like a gift from God, even though it's technically from us, right? And the Catholics kind of had it the other way around, where they were really bombastic early on. They have a state. They're doing all these things, right? And then at some point in their history, they tried to like turn that around and say, oh, no, wait. We make all these beautiful things for you. We're not, we're not out here, you don't, well, maybe the Pope has a plane, but it's not, like super lavish. So they want to try to like dial that back, because they have more time to realize, oh, these guys are just taking our money and blowing it on all this crazy self-indulgent shit that, obviously is against the teachings of Jesus in the Bible, right? He's like, it's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of the needle than to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? And so he's like, what are they doing with all this money? Oh, well, it turns out the Catholic Church is hoarding like, some crazy percentage of the world's actual wealth, artifacts and things like that, right? So why do these guys need to be so wealthy? And so the Catholics kind of, have already started to kind of push back against that a little bit. And so I think it's interesting to talk about like, oh yeah, well, they don't make the churches so extravagant anymore. I mean, we still have the Vatican, of course, but if we go back to that idea, right, that what does God need money for? And if God needs money, why doesn't he just produce it himself? It doesn't make any sense, and it is contrary to their doctrine, and so they're constantly having to find new ways to convince, to manipulate the congregants to keep giving them money, because otherwise the organization itself would fail, because it's all dependent on those private donations. And at least here it's tax free, so it's very, very profitable.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was I don't think that's what they intended, but that was the end result. Was like
Yeah.
to the rest, everybody was like, it looks like, yeah,
Yeah.
looks like communist brutalism. But I think that, to interpret their motivations charitably, I think that
Okay.
they were trying to, have this monastic spirituality. But there's a reason why only some are called to that, you know, and that's kind of like,
Yeah.
that's like, dark night of the senses kind of thing. Let's remove the sense support. And God does
Wow.
that for some people that are on a spiritual journey and into depth, and that has its place. But for the vast majority of us as lay people, we are faced with other kinds of struggles that God gives us, and we're not asked to be to give up all sense consolation in our vocation.
Wow. That's so helpful. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. Thank you for that, Dr. Bergsma. Yeah. Hey.
So I don't know. To me, it sounds like he's talking about like actual sensory deprivation. He's like, oh, hey, yeah, it's like way better if we just deprive ourselves of all, physical sensations. Like, then we could just all we would do. So, like, just perpetually being in prayer and meditation, right? Like, none of that makes sense. Like, and that guy seems like probably about as nervous as me. He really doesn't have any good answers to this, and so he's just kind of babbling about like how well, you can't really sense God, but if you can sense him, it's not with a sense that you use in the physical world. It's got to be with some metaphysical sense perception. But we can manipulate these sense perceptions, through physical intermediaries. So I I don't know what to do with that. I have no idea what I'm doing with that. Good morning, my awesome life. So good to see you. And Dr. Mordecai says, so churches trusting cash more than Jesus? I would say so. I mean, they need that cash to keep the lights on, because Jesus ain't gonna just make that stuff appear. Jesus ain't paying the bills. I mean, he is in the sense that he is the catalyst to getting the money from the people. Um, yeah, and I think that's another thing. At least with like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually put something out there to try to collect their tithes, in the form of like missionary work and stuff like that. It's not like the evangelicals who are just like, yeah, let me put up a TV station and tell people to send money for prayers. These guys are out working for it, so I have a little bit of respect for that. But it's the same grift in different garb, right? They all need money. God, with all of his intelligence and power, cannot seem to generate money for himself. So it is incumbent upon us to do that. so that's what they're doing. I don't think I've ever in my life donated to religious organization, and never will. So if that is a requirement, then consider me disqualified, right? I'm not giving my money away to an invisible man in the sky who has the power to generate his own. And further has no actual need for money, because he has no need for like sustenance, right? I would rather devote that to people. And so if the work is being devoted to helping people, then why would I give money to a church? All that being said, it all sounds kind of like, communistic to me. I don't know. Are these churches all communist? What are they talking about? No, but anyway, that's my nonsensical ramblings for today. And many thanks to Nanya Biz for commenting, and everybody here in the live chat. This has been great. I got Dr. Mordecai Cassius Marcellus Jones Jr., aka John Level, Tilting Windmill, My Awesome Life. I saw James Apperson back there, Geo Sam, and I think I covered everybody. And so have a happy 5th of November. There's something in there from like V for Vendetta, but I won't do it now. And anyway, much love. Be well, be kind, and stay trusty. And we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.